Chapter 6 Prince Arthur. It was before dawn that a stiff Elune was woken from her bed, a bundle of cloths in an alcove at the back of the kitchens. Rodri and Saxon were already up, already directing their staff to tasks, and the first Elune was given was to collect wood for the fire. "There's to be a feast tonight," another kitchen servant told her, another Briton who worked in Bayard's palace kitchens. His name was Elfmere, a spirit of the sea. He had once told Elund, son of 2 Briton slaves captured not far from Amwithig, and given a Saxon name. "There's going to be a peace treaty, a real peace treaty." Elund smiled as she strode to the door. Elfmere hurried with trays that almost reached his chin. Clearly a good deal of baking and roasting was to be done. A relief for Ger to be out in the fresh air bringing in the wood. "This way," sneered a voice above her head. Elund's heat sank as she looked up to see the boy who had tried to trick them the day before. "Wood," Elund told him, deferring to their jobs and speaking in Cymraeg. "I am to collect it for the fires." "A bold one you are, say." He sneered, and jumped down from the wall. "Merfine," called a voice behind him, more cautious and reserved than the first boy. "We are to leave the say alone," Rodri told. "Rodri can go to the depths of hell," growled Merfine, and raised a staff of wood. "You would by the look of it." Growing boys in her village would prove their prowess by firing and slaying a deer using a yew bow, so hard it was to pull. A strong wood, but not as strong as the axe that was leaning against the tree trunks, waiting to become the firewood she was to bring. Elund made a grab for it and deflected a blow from the staff, wheeling round and flicking the staff away with the backstroke. Merfine watched it roll away in horror. "IWS asked to come to Camelot by my king," Elune told him, holding the axe defensively. "Attack me again and it will be the last thing you do." Relief began to fill her chest as Merfine and his rakish companion began to sidle away. And then she realized why. "You come with me." The voice was that of Prince Arthur. Elund would tell him, sometime in the future, of their first meeting, that he had freed her from domestic drudgery and led her, ultimately, to his side. But Arthur always claimed to not recall his first words. He did, however, remember hers. "You will have to catch me first." To be fair to Elund, she did not know he was the prince. She thought him to be a mere guard of Camelot. And a mere guard of Camelot was not going to stop her in her duty, was not going to stop her at all. The axe was dropped, the wood was gathered. Elund raced past Arthur and Merlin, who had been alerted to the commotion by Gwen, who had been outside collecting drinking water. Elund had been asked to collect firewood, and so she had. And, once she had done it, had hidden in the back of the kitchen and redressed in the clothing of a Sagard, which she had stolen the night before. 88,888,888. "I don't understand it, Merlin. I clearly saw a servant fighting another servant." "Perhaps ask the 2 who ran away." "My lord." Merlin added the deference with emphasis. He was not in the mood for one of Arthur's grudges. Merlin knew he had to discipline his servants so he could impress his authority for the day when he was crowned king. But from Merlin's point of view of the altercation, it was the boy on the wall, one of Camelot's own, who had begun it. The say servant was merely defending himself. "Go back to the kitchens and look again," Arthur told him, wearily. "I will not have my father humiliated by a mere servant." "Yes, sire." But Merlin was gone before Arthur could work put he was being disrespectful, and happened upon a group of maids heading to the say quarters. One, Gara, paused and spoke to Merlin. Not all the say were bad, Merlin considered, as he walked to the kitchens, where he wouldn't find this disrespectful say servant. He knew it, though he looked, but was proved right. The feast, however, looked delicious, and Merlin's stomach overrode anything else his mind was telling him. "Why were you so long, Merlin?" snapped Arthur, when Merlin returned to Arthur's rooms. "Because you told me to be thorough, my lord," Merlin told him, promptly, and had taken the long way round to see if he could find the Saxon maid Cara again. "You take far too long to do any task I give you, Merlin. You really are a simpleton." Arthur thrust his best tunic towards Merlin. "Get it ironed, and my best breeches." He watched Merlin appraise the garments, and snapped, Now, if I'm a simpleton, what does that make you, my lord? Merlin replied. But under his breath as he headed away from Arthur and towards the kitchens again. Elund, meanwhile, was heading to the great hall for the feast along with the rest of Bayard's household guards. Which is where it was all about to go wrong. 88,888,888. A toast to friendship. King Arthur was on his feet. 2 goblets stood on the top table, where the king, Arthur, Morgana and their servants were sitting. King Bayard, from a table opposite Camelot's royal family, rose from between Queen Scylla and Princess Ines. Merlin, friendship, declared Bayard, who made his way to the center of the tables, standing right in front of the King of Camelot. Alliance, peace. From her position to the right of the table, Elune turned her head. Drat, the servant of Prince Arthur, was standing in her way. It's Merlin, he told her, smiling a welcome. Elune narrowed her eyes at him. I didn't ask. Merlin stepped back, recoiling from Elunde's forcefulness. I only wanted to ask you yours. Elunde narrowed her eyes again. No, she told him. But this time Merlin would not be dissuaded. I was sent to find you. You ran from Prince Arthur today? He was satisfied with the look of horror on her face. I won't tell your secret, but I would like to know your name. Elune sagged and turned back to the prince's servant. Aeled, she told him. Aeled? You're Britain? Elune turned to Merlin and gripped him by the front of his robe. I am Say, and you will tell no one, Elune emphasized. Otherwise I will kill you. Merlin laughed nervously as the speech of Bayard continued. Even though he had magic, sometimes a blade was faster than his words. You have a secret, he told her. As do you. Elune gripped Merlin's tunic tighter. Merlin nodded in agreement. I can sense it. You're ... The servants of my palace, those of Britain blood. Come forth, come forth. Bayard was gesturing to the people, the Cymric people who has stood before him in his palace. Come on, Aeled. The voice came from the back of the hall. Aeled looked and Seren approached. Merlin widened his eyes, realizing that Aeled had to put him down now. You are Britain, Merlin declared. But Elunde had no time to issue more threats, as she was being guided towards the center of the hall to stand beside Bayard. Elunde, in her guard's clothes, felt her indignation grow. But she listened as Bayard told Arthur that, as a gesture of friendship, all Britons were free to stay in Camelot. Elune watched as Arthur nodded, clearly a pre-prepared gesture, for he was not surprised by it. What are you doing in that uniform? Seren asked Elunde as she went to stand beside the wall again. Avoiding Prince Arthur. Oh. Merlin, who was enjoying teasing Elunde, particularly in front of her friend, took a step back at Elunde's grab for him. But then, a woman caught his eye and Merlin left them, leaving the hall together, heads close as they talked. So what are you doing? Seren brushed the seam of Elunde's tunic. Escaping arrest, she told Seren, and proceeded to tell her the whole thing. These goblets are broken bar as a gesture of friendship, a broken bar. But you're going to change back? Own up. With great reluctance, Elunde nodded. She had enjoyed being a guard, it beat being a servant. Behind them, scuffle, Merlin was standing beside Prince Arthur. Seren stepped aside and they both stared. How do you know King Bayard has put poison into this goblet? The chalices, once in a box and had sat upon the table before Arthur throughout the meal, were now being inspected. Your servant will taste it. A callous move from Arthur, who was supposed to protect all in Camelot, thought Elunde. Shortly followed by another, what will happen to the Britons who were being released? We will just go, Seren told her. And then she gripped Elunde's hand as Merlin drank the wine that had been destined for Arthur. At first, nothing happened and Merlin declared Bayard to be innocent. But, to their shock, Arthur's servant then choked, put his hand to his throat and collapsed. Uproar that Elunde took full advantage of. Stepping past Seren, she took up a knight's sword and stood, blade point to her king's neck. Bayard would never have done this, Elunde thought, as she pretended to threaten him. Why go through all of this when they could just have another battle? Why risk his family coming here? You three, take Bayard away. Arthur was staring right at her. Elunde bowed her head. She felt angry, and determined to defend the lord she had chosen. Bayard was king of Mercia, a Saxon. Her father was a Saxon. Elune had chosen, and, because she had chosen Camelot guard armor, livery and sword. It had worked in her favor. For now, as Merlin was carried away, and the Saxons incensed at the accusation, Elune could show her worth to Bayard, show him, and everyone, prove that the King of Mercia was free from blame.